Hi, my name is Jessica Beha, and I'm with Great Rivers Regional System for Addiction Care. And we are doing our This Is My Story series. And so we want to thank you so much for joining in today. Today we have Jenn with us, and Jenn is going to take part of our This Is My Story series. And we've actually been asked to do a 5-part series for Recovery Month. And so Jenn is one of the lovely individuals that has agreed to join us for Recovery Month's This Is My Story. And so Jenn, I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to you and let you tell your story.
All right, thanks, Jessica. All right, I'm Jenn, and I'm a person in long-term recovery. So I'll tell you a little bit about what it was like and what it's like now. So I'm from Morgantown. I was raised by a single mom. I have one brother that is 2 years younger than I am. My dad died when I was 2 and my brother was 6 months old, and my mom raised us and my grandmother helped. We'd always lived as one with our grandmother from the time my dad died. Childhood wasn't horrible, but there was, like everybody else, things going on. She did a really good job raising us. She was a great mom. She provided and worked very hard to take care of us. My grandmother was retired, so she was there most of the time when my mom did work. And we had a lot of family at that point. My uncles, my aunt, they all were very involved with us. My cousins were all older, a lot older. So me and my brother were the babies. So we got, the attention from everybody, I guess you could say. But life had its way of doing things, I guess. We were a close family, but when I was 10 years old, my aunt, which was my mom's sister, she got sick, and within a few months of her being sick, she had died. I helped take care of her. Within a few weeks, her husband died as well. So that left it was real big on our family. It seemed like after my Aunt Sandy died and my Uncle Albert died, that like the family was kind of divided. My grandma was never the same after my aunt died, and it put a huge toll on the rest of the family. It was really hard. I remember being at her funeral and like the pain I felt, like it just was like no other. I was really close with her. Their kids were older, so like they always took care of me, and I was always up there on the weekends. I went on family vacations with them. And we were extremely close. They lived like 2 blocks away from us where I grew up. And I had my uncles and mom, and we all got through that. I would say around the age of 11 or 12 is when I started like seeing a big change in myself. I became very like I was very disruptive. I was always arguing and fighting with my mom, with my brother, and my grandma always took my side. My mom used to get really upset because my mom always would say I was a hellion. And my grandma always took my side no matter what. Like my uncles would be mad at me, my brother would be mad at me, but like I did no wrong in my grandmother's eyes. And I was named after her as well. So that had to do with a lot of it. And I was the first grandchild that she had, and there was, I think, 12 altogether. And she was there when I was born. So, yeah, her and I had a special bond that was like no other, that's for sure. But around the age 11 or 12, going into middle school, like I just didn't feel like I fit in with anybody, like any crowds. And I went from, crowd to crowd, like trying to fit in. And I did have a group of of girls that I hung out with that lived in my neighborhood that most of them I'm still friends with to this day. And I've definitely put them through a lot. And but I just never really fit in, and I always wanted to find just a group that I wanted that I could fit in with, and it was just extremely hard. So at the age of 13, I remember having my first drink. Um, I was at my friend's dad's house in Preston County, and her dad and stepmom were at the Buckwheat Festival, and we thought it was a good idea to drink. Not only drink, but every liquor that was in the liquor cabinet, we had mixed together. It did not turn out to be a good weekend. We ended up getting into an argument and fighting, but I just remember that feeling at that point, like I didn't have to feel anything else. I didn't feel anything. Laid in bed for the whole weekend. And I remember them taking me home on Sunday and telling my mom, well, she's been sick all weekend. I definitely wasn't sick. I was hungover. But I continued, we lived next to the baseball fields, and all of us girls and, the guys from our neighborhood would hang out. The ice rink was there, the ball fields, our middle school was right there. And like, that's what we did on the weekends. All of us would get dropped off at the ice skating rink, and our parents would drop us off, and we'd leave and drink until it was time to be picked up. My mom was extremely overbearing when I was a teenager. She always wanted us to be like perfect, what I thought was perfect. But I wasn't. I was nowhere near that. And I knew that. And I acted out horribly because of that. She wanted me to be perfect, and I wanted to be like everybody else. But I wasn't. Her and I fought so much, and like, she was very overprotective. And, she had to know where I was, what I was doing every hour of the day. And it drove me insane. And it took me away from her more than anything, because she wanted us to go to school and play basketball or play baseball and do everything she wanted us to do. And it didn't work out that way. My mom had a hard childhood, and like, my uncles would always say that, my grandfather was an alcoholic, my great grandfather was an alcoholic, and they lived with that their whole entire life. My grandmother, she had never had a drink or smoke or definitely no drugs in her life, but my grandfather was completely different. I know she wanted better for us, but as a kid, I didn't understand that. I wanted to be my own person. I thought I could take care of myself at 13 years old, which was crazy. But she was, she used to tell us all the time, like, I just want you guys to have better than I ever did. And, today I realize that then I didn't. I wanted to be an ornery teenager. And so at the age like 13, 14, interested in boys and the alcohol. And that's what we did on the weekends. We drank. And then going into high school, it got a lot worse. In high school, different middle schools came into one high school, met a lot of new people, older people, and it was pretty bad. My sophomore year of high school, I think I attended 15 days. So in January of that school year, I had skipped school. I'd been drinking, and I think that's when I started smoking pot. And they had called my mom into the office, and I had missed all this school. And she was like, what in the world? They would shake me down. My uncle and her would shake me down when I got home from school, dump out my backpack. They're finding bowls and things in my backpack, and I'm denying it. And I'm arguing and fighting with them and calling them liars, but it's visible. It's right there in front of their face. So January of that year, my mom ended up getting arrested for truancy. And then they gave me one more chance, didn't go back to school. Instead, I ran away. My mom had had enough. So she wouldn't allow me back in her house, and I had to go stay with family friends of ours. And so she calls me and she was like, you can't come back home. Well, what do you mean I can't come back home? The judge wanted to send me off, and my mom got them to let me go to Maine to live with my Uncle Rick, which was her brother. I was so mad at her for that. Like, I felt like, man, like, I'm your kid and you're sending me away. Like, obviously I was troubled, like I would flip out and break everything in the house. And, my grandma was old and she was on pins and needles all the time. My poor brother, I put him through living hell, and he didn't deserve that. But I didn't care who I hurt. My mom, like, I don't know how she stayed with me as long as she did, dealing with everything I put her through and calling her names. And like one time I had kicked her and I dislocated her kneecap in one of my rages drinking, because I didn't get my own way and she wasn't going to let me leave the house. So I did what I had to do. So my mom ended up sending me to Maine. I lived there for about 6.5 months. I held a huge resentment for many, many years because I didn't understand like why she would want to send me away when I was fine where I was at least I thought so, but she was trying to save me. I lived in Maine with him and went to school. I lived with him and my aunt and my cousin. It was good. He had always lived in Maine, so it was good that I got the time I did with him and got to know him, and it was an experience, that's for sure. I did the same thing there. My mom, she used to get on to my uncle about like, I sent her up there for punishment and you just let her do whatever. And I was out drinking, boys, the whole 9 yards. I ended up going back to Morgantown and going back to school. And I started out pretty good that year. Well, by the end of the year, I was back doing the same thing, still partying, still drinking all the time. So, it just kept on and kept on. By this time, my mom didn't want me around any of the people I had been around forever, most of my childhood, like all my friends, like she just didn't want me around them and wouldn't allow it. So I would run away and be around them. So starting my senior year of high school, I ended up thinking it was a good idea to get my own apartment with one of my friends. It definitely wasn't. Every dime that we had saved, we spent on drinking, and there we had no place to live, so it was time to go back home. I was going to school, and they ended up telling me that right before, a couple months before graduation, that I would have to go back for a semester. So I just dropped out completely because I wasn't going to go back, and they were in the wrong. It wasn't me. I want to point my finger at everybody else. So, as I got older, the drinking increased. I was experimenting with different drugs at that point, but nothing too serious. I couldn't hold a job even at the age of 18 because I was always hungover or partying all day, just hanging out with people I shouldn't have. I ended up meeting my oldest son's father, and he was a lot older than I was. and I ended up getting pregnant for Michael. Within a few weeks of me finding out I was pregnant, he left. And he moved away, and he was having another child with his other child's mom. So, I remember contacting his family, and they were like, get rid of it. I'm like, no. In my mind, I thought like this baby would love me, like, because I just never felt the love that I should have. I thought I always felt different. I never felt like I fit in, and I thought this baby was going to make things better. Um, Within a few weeks of him leaving, I ended up meeting my other two kids' father. Which was a little different. He's a few years older than I am. We were together for 15 and a half years. You know, I was used to these boys from home, country boys, and I met this guy from a big city. I didn't know what I was doing. So I ended up having my oldest son, and he was there. My mom was really mad for the longest time when I got pregnant. She didn't accept the fact that I was pregnant until I was 7 months pregnant. And then it was, everything was great. She didn't understand why I was with a different man if I was pregnant by one. But, that's whatever it is. So my ex and I, we were together for 15 years. I had my oldest son, and, this fantasy life, mom, dad, baby, it didn't go that way at all. I had never really been around hard drugs, but he introduced those to me. And within just a few weeks, we were getting high every single day. Right after my oldest son was born, my grandma died. And it was extremely hard on our family. But then a week later, my uncle died, and they both died in my mom's home. And things just fell to pieces. My mom started drinking all the time. She was grandma, but and she loved my son, but she drank all the time. She never really dated or partied growing up ever. We didn't know what that was growing up. But my late teenage years, when I was doing my craziness, mom started to drink, and it, went on for a few years. After my grandma died, things were really rocky, and I felt really alone when I had Michael. I didn't know how to cope with the loss of my grandma and my uncle, having this 6-week-old baby. My mom's busy, between the death of them and the drinking, she couldn't handle it either. So I got closer to my kids' father, and, I didn't want him to leave. So I had to be perfect. And I thought I needed to use to keep him around, or I needed to be okay with him selling drugs to keep him around, because I didn't want to be alone. I didn't know how to be alone. I ended up getting pregnant for my middle son. And, I thought one thing closer, he's going to stay. I'm having his kid. Things got really bad. I didn't want him going anywhere, doing anything, sell the drugs, come home type thing. We fought horribly. And I know I said some horrible, horrible, horrible things that I probably shouldn't have, but I was, in my mind, I literally was going crazy because I knew I didn't want to use and get high, and I didn't want to be up and just all this responsibility. My mom's busy. My poor brother, he's just in high school trying to make it and trying to do something. And, I know we put him through hell. Um, so my uncle Rick that lived in Maine, he ended up dying as well. Right after, like 6 months later. So it was a mess for a long time. But things got better. I had my middle son, um, but their dad and I continued on fighting. Like, we abused each other for a very long time. I hit him, he hit me, and then we would make up and things would be okay, and then we'd do it again. It was just a vicious cycle that we did with each other, for many, 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 many years. So we ended up moving, and he ended up getting into some trouble, and CPS ended up getting involved. And I just had my boys, and my mom was like, leave him. So he's in jail, and I pack all of our stuff up, our house, and I move into my mom's house. That was a horrible mistake because we were at each other's necks 24/7. I worked, she worked, my brother lived there, but it was a horrible idea. And I was still seeing their dad when he got out of jail, and I ended up getting pregnant for my daughter. And I'm like, oh gosh, I can't tell my mom. She's going to be so mad because I had a huge thing. Like, I never wanted to disappoint my mom. So I lied to her constantly. So she didn't know anything was going on in my life. And, I always had my own place. So, like, she didn't really come over or anything like that either. And, like, I would take the kids and go to her house. We didn't have a vehicle or anything. He didn't work. I mean, we sold drugs, and that's how we lived. And I worked. At that point, I did work, though, 2 full-time jobs to take care of the kids and all of us. So the day I had my daughter, I called my mom, and she was very mad, but she was accepting of it, and we moved on. For a few years, things weren't too bad because right after I had my daughter, he had to work because I ended up getting really sick and I couldn't work. So, but the fighting and the getting high continued. I don't know how many times my windows had been smashed out of my house. I don't know how many times he had came home and had been stabbed or shot at. Like, I'm lucky I kept my kids for as long as I did without losing them. And my mom never knew. He had been arrested on multiple different things, multiple charges. And here I am with these 3 little babies, and my mom knows nothing. I pushed my family and my friends away because I didn't want them knowing what we were doing. So, years went on and things were pretty bad. Things got worse. A couple times in the hospital dealing with it, from the abuse. So about 6 years ago, he left. He cheated and he left, which I thought was a good thing, but I drove myself insane. I did not know how to adult with this man in my life. So I met a different man, and we were together for 6 years. And he introduced me to a lot more than I had ever been introduced to. He was very, very abusive. I ended up staying in our house for about 18 months. And then the guy I was with previously, he was in prison. So I moved all 3 of my kids and we moved to my mom's house. When we moved to my mom's house, that was probably the worst mistake I could have made. It gave me free range to do what I wanted when I wanted. My kids were a little bit older. They weren't babies. They went to school. I did work, but I left at night. I got high. I stole everything in sight from my mom's house, pawned, sold to the dope man. It didn't matter. And I didn't care what anybody thought. And like I was living under my mom's roof, but like she had no idea what was going on. She worked 80 hours a week. And then when she wasn't working, she had my kids and was taking care of my kids. So things got so bad. I became strung out. I had a really good job at this time and making thousands of dollars, and I spent every dime of it. I couldn't buy my kids shoes. I couldn't pay my phone bill. So my mom found out that a bunch of stuff in the house was missing, and she questioned me about it. And of course, I lied. She gave me two options. She said, either get it together, Jennifer, or get out. I said, I'll get it together. Within 2 hours, I packed a bag and I left. I never returned back to her home, and that was 4 years ago. So she had my kids for a few months, and I was completely strung out. I stayed with whoever I could, robbed, stole, whatever I had to do to be high. So I get a phone call one day, and it was my mom, and my brother was in town, and she had told me that she had been in the hospital for 3 days, and they diagnosed her with cancer, and they had given her just a few months to live. She was extremely sick at this point. So, you know, as time went on, I didn't think anything could get worse, but it got worse, way worse. I remember that day that she called me, and like from that day forward, like nothing was ever the same. Like my mission in life was to numb what I was going through. Like the thought of my mom not being there, like I just couldn't imagine it. Even though I was a horrible daughter and I did horrible things, like my mom always loved me and was always there no matter what. So in April of that year, I had robbed the last dope man, and I was at my wit's end. So I called my cousin. Well, I called my mom, and she called my cousin, and my cousin called a good friend of ours, who now is my boss, and he got me into my first detox. Mom still had the kids at this point, so I went to detox 5 days. I got out. They had me a bed at a sober living house in Clarksburg. So when I got out, my kids' father and his wife at the time picked me up, and he had these papers, and he said, I think you need to sign the kids over to me while you go to sober living. I had it in my mind that my mom was against me, completely against me. She most likely was in denial about me being a drug addict and alcoholic. I get it, because I would be too. But I went and took my kids from my mom and gave them to their dad and signed them over. Biggest mistake of my life. So I ended up going to sober living. Well, I ended up getting high. A couple months later, ended up using. It was a pattern. Kept running back to the same people, places, and things, and I kept using. I'd get 90 days here, 60 days there. I think I had 6 months at one point, and I'd get high. So I had stabilized myself for what I thought was stabilized a little, and I ended up getting a phone call, and my mom was worse. Like, she did talk to me, we would stay up while I was in the sober living house. She would stay up and talk to me. She'd have chemo and stuff, and we'd have conversations till like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And she just didn't understand it. But like, she was glad I was there and she was proud of me at that point. She just didn't trust me, which I wouldn't either. And she was really hurt. She was heartbroken I took the kids from her. So I ended up relapsing and ended up back in Morgantown, and I went to the hospital and I got into treatment in Huntington. So I had tried to do long term, and like, people were from home that's not one of us kept telling me, you don't need long term treatment. Like, you're not that bad off. So in my head, I'm like, I'm not that bad off. I don't need long term. So I leave. I go back to Clarksburg to a different sober living house. Well, the girl I was in sober living with previously had just gotten out of jail 2 days later. We relapsed. Within 30 days of that relapse, I got out November 7th, November 9th, I had relapsed, and December 23rd, I was sitting in North Central Regional Jail on an armed robbery charge looking at 10 to life. That month, things spiraled out of control. I went back to the same guy I was with. We fought so bad. I had black eyes. I was black and blue from head to toe, and I just kept taking it. I remember falling to my knees some days and being like, please, God, please just take me, because I cannot take any more of this. Been up for weeks and weeks at this point. Ended up going to jail. I spent about 5 months in jail. You know, I hadn't used while I was in jail the whole time. I got out on bond and went back to the same people, places, and things, and ended up back in jail. This time, I had been up for like 30 days straight, and I was on the run. Supposed to go to court, and I'd been up for way too long. I could not walk into the courtroom with two black. I was a mess. So I ended up going on the run because they wanted me to sign a plea for 5 to 18 years. And people were like, no, don't do it. This is your first time ever being in trouble. Don't do it. So I ended up going on the run, spent 3 months out on the run. The house I was staying at, there was a drug bust, and I so happened to be there, and I went to jail that day. That day saved my life. I do know that. I've not picked up and used since that day. It was July 23rd, 2019. Me going to jail saved my life that day. So a week after I go to jail, the counselors came and got me. And when they came and got me, I knew what had happened. I never went out unless it was going to court, and I knew I wasn't going to court that day. They were taking me to their office, and I knew my mom had died. Like, I became like so weak I could barely walk down that hallway. And my good friend from home, she's my sister, she had called the jail after she had went and told my kids that my mom had died. She had called the jail to tell me that she had died. That was the worst feeling in the entire world. I felt I was alone. You know, at this point, I hadn't talked to my mom in months. My kids' father would not let me talk to my kids. And he kept telling me, like, just turn yourself in. I'll let you talk to the kids. I'm like, I'm not turning myself in. Like, I'm not going to sit in jail. And so I felt so hopeless and so alone. My kids were gone. My mom was gone. I had nothing left at this point. And I had hit rock bottom. That was enough for me. So I ended up calling a good friend, and he said, "Are you ready to go to long-term treatment?" I said, "Absolutely. Let's get there." So 30 days later, I was sitting in Charleston in long-term treatment. I remember sitting in jail like, man, I'm just going to get to treatment. I just want out of jail. I'm not going to stay. I'm just going to go and deal with it and leave. Well, how am I going to, nobody's talking to me. How am I going to get from Charleston to Morgantown was the big, but I sat there. I did everything I was supposed to do. It changed my life. I was miserable. Like, I didn't even want to live. But I don't think if I wouldn't have hit that rock bottom like I did and everybody and everything was gone, I wouldn't be sitting here today. I don't think I could have made it if I would have gotten out of jail and went back out. I don't think I would be alive today. And like that, it went through my mind, like I would never want my kids feeling the way I feel. Like losing my mom was it is the hardest things I've ever dealt with in my life. And I've dealt with a lot of death and a lot of grief and a lot of chaos, but the loss of my mom was something completely different. I believe the death of my mom made me who I am today. And it's crappy to say that because I couldn't be the person that she wanted me to be, but now I am. But that's okay. It is. So I ended up going to treatment, and it went great. I learned a lot of things about myself. It changed my whole aspect of life. I can see things a lot more clear now than I ever could. End up, I really didn't have a plan for when I left treatment, but things just fell in place for me. My kids came to see me one time before I left treatment, and it was like we didn't even skip a beat. Like I hadn't seen them in a year, maybe a little longer than that, besides an hour or two before that. But they came to see me, and I knew I had to stay. I had to stay this way. Like I didn't ever want to go back to the way I was before that last time. That pain was too much to ever go through again. I completed treatment, and I thought get an apartment, do things. I got offered, to manage a sober living house for women that struggle with addiction, and it's amazing. I get to work with the community and work with people like me every single day to help them get back on track if that's what they choose. My life isn't perfect today, but and I still struggle, but like I have a good life. My kids are in my life today. I pushed my family away to the ones that are still left, to the point they didn't want anything to do with me. I talked to my brother for 2.5 hours a month ago for the first time in 3.5 years. Like that just, I don't know, when he, I'll send messages here and there, but like him wanting to talk to me was absolutely amazing. I'm really glad to be where I'm at today in my life. I'm glad I have real family, and I have real friends. I have people that love me no matter what. I have a bad day. I don't have to pick up the news, but I can pick up the phone and call somebody. And I know they truly love me for who I am, not for what I have. I've gained so much back, and I'm just really grateful for it. I'm grateful for everybody that I've came in contact with. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen. I really appreciate you telling your story. I love what you said just now. Like, they love you for who you are, not what you have. And I think that's awesome. I've had the privilege of getting to know you over the last few months with planning the Glow Run for Recovery. And so that's going to take place on September the 18th. And so I've gotten the privilege of getting to know you that way. So this was a privilege to be able to hear your full story. And I don't know, that just really stuck out to me. They love you for who you are, not what you have. And I think that's a true testament to who you are. It really is. But we want to thank you so much for just being willing to share your story. We thank you. Thank you. I know this can be a little nerve wracking at times, having to share your story, but we want to thank you so much for being willing to share your story. We also want to thank you guys for listening and taking the time out to listen to Jen's story. We will be doing these stories all week long for Recovery Month. This month, September, is National Recovery Month. And the theme for this year is everybody, recovery is for everyone. Sorry, my brain wasn't working, but recovery is for everyone, every person, every family, and every community. And Jenn is just a very small representation that recovery is for everyone. And so we want to thank you again for taking time out of your day to share your story. And we want to thank you for taking time out of your day to listen to Jenn's story. Thank you guys. Have a good afternoon.